I thought I would just show you these books real quick. We'll, just take a quick look at what is in them, and talk about some of the stories, see if I get any inspiration when I'm looking at them. This is the Best of Orbit by Damon Knight. Damon Knight did these wonderful Orbit anthologies, and if you're a short story lover, and I mean, if you're into science fiction, especially 60s, 70s, and 80s, I'd find it hard to believe that you're not a short story lover. And if you're not, you're really missing out. But this would be a great place to start. The Best from Orbit would maybe compel you to want to go find all of the other Orbits. At this sale, I was lucky enough to get a bunch of them. Although it's really funny, I didn't have the first edition, and some people said that really triggered their OCD. I get that. There is cover art here, although I'm not even able to begin to guess who it's by. I mean, I could throw some guesses out there, don't know who it is. Books like this are notorious for not crediting the artist. Okay, so yeah, artist uncredited. I mean, that's just kind of the way. It's not unusual. He might actually be credited there. I don't feel like holding you up looking for it. And if you get to stare at that, you might see it where I'm not seeing it. Like I said, Damon is the one who put this anthology series together, all of these various Orbits. So when I saw that there's actually a best of them, it's nice to see someone's opinion on what the best are. So this is this one has something called a sort of introduction. Richard McKenna, I'm trying to remember if I have ever read anything by Richard McKenna, and it's not ringing a bell. For as many books as I have, I'm not as well read as I would like to be. I don't get to read as much as I want to. When you write, you split your time between writing and life, or reading and life. So sometimes reading takes a back seat. Also, reading can be incredibly influential, and sometimes you don't want to be influenced when you're in the process of creating something, believe it or not. You want to stick to your inspiration. Then you go read other stuff. It's always this fine line that you're walking. And I don't know that that's true for every author, but I know that it's true for me. I noticed here we have a story in here by Kate Wilhelm. There might actually be several in here, it appears. Kate and Damon founded Clarion Writers Workshop. It was at one point, I believe, Milford Writers Workshop, which was in Pennsylvania. So there's an R.A. Lafferty. My understanding is that R.A. Lafferty was the most wonderful drunk ever. And there's a really great video of Harold Waldrop and Gardner Dozois and George R.R. Martin speaking at Capclave, and I believe it was Capclave 2010. That is just the most hilarious video, and so they talk about laugh in there a little bit, and it's really, really, really funny and very endearing, and they clearly loved him. There's another story in here by Joanna Russ. As another great writer. If you've never looked into her works, I recommend it. Philip Jose Farmer's in here. I love Philip Jose Farmer's work. He was definitely exploring angles and topics and subjects that in the 60s were still considered somewhat verboten by the science fiction community, which is a shame. They're very uptight. And, we've worked that out over the years. He was definitely willing to push the boundaries early. And if you really want one of his most boundary-pushing stories to read, it would be Image of the Beast and Blown, are two books that are kind of like detective novels, but and also science fiction / supernatural / erotica. And in that same vein, one of his earliest Wold Newton books would be A Feast Unknown, which is just a savagely and violent send-up of Doc Savage and Tarzan. And really, really well done, and just so much fun to read. I think I've read that book 2 or 3 times. Richard Corbin also did an illustrated version of it, and if you can afford to buy that, it might be worth it. And of course, Gene Wolfe is in here, and that the only thing you need to remember about Gene Wolfe is that even though he was a science fiction writer, many people said he was the greatest living writer while he was alive in any field or genre. So you see a recurring theme here. There's a lot of Silverberg stories turning up in here. The great Harlan Ellison is in here. Norman Spinrad. Le Guin is in here, Lafferty again, Wolfe again, Dozois is actually in here. There's a Gardner Dozois story, and he was such a great editor. He got the Hugo Award for editing best of yearly anthologies for years. More Joanna Russ. Carol Emshwiller, I have a really nice anthology of hers. All right, so that's the best of Orbit, and really, that's a great way to start this off. This is a pretty damn nice anthology. I hadn't gotten a chance to take a look at this since I bought these. I haven't really gotten a chance to examine them at all. I thought I would do it, during a book haul like this, just so that I could capture my own enthusiasm for some of this stuff. And I have to say, I'm very pleased with that book. There's a lot of good stuff in there. This was the next book in the book haul. Well, I'm taking a look at these now, and I'm realizing that they're actually in an order. There's a 2A and a 2B. There's volume 1. Got a volume 4 and a volume 3. All right. So, well, let's at least try to do them in order, right? I mean, that's fair. So this is the first one. And this is edited by Robert Silverberg, which I had not realized until just now. I mean, that already elevates this book immensely. Chosen by the members of the Science Fiction Writers of America, SFWA. I remember when I was younger and enthusiastically writing and working all day and then trying to write at night. I still was doing about a weekly output of about 10,000 words a week. I wanted to be in the SFWA really badly, and then every once in a while I would meet somebody who was in it, and they really were not that thrilled with being in it, and I thought, quit shitting on my dream. But as it stands now, I don't know if I'm ever going to pull that off, but I still do love to write, so who cares? Whether or not it makes it or gets read, I'm having a good time. Got some great old stories in here. John W. Campbell, Lester Del Rey, Heinlein. I think The Roads That Must Roll was actually done as a radio play by X-1, which you can find on YouTube now. Years ago, when you couldn't find it on YouTube, you could buy it on a CD for very little money, but they've been uploaded and re-uploaded. I think they're in the public domain, but boy, are they good. So I recommend checking out X-1 if you get a chance. There's some Sturgeon stories in there and other authors. They're good little stage plays. I really enjoyed them. There's Nightfall by Isaac Asimov. That pretty much put him on the map for short stories. And I'm just reading down here, possibly with you at the same time, although with this camera angle, it might be a bit of a stretch depending on your vision. So there's a Little Black Bag by C.M. Kornbluth. That is a noted story by him. There's a Richard Matheson story in here. He wrote I Am Legend, which later became one of my favorite B movies of all time, The Omega Man with Charlton Heston. And I really love the soundtrack to that one too. Anthony Boucher's in here. James Blish is in here. And Matt at Bookpilled really got me interested in James Blish. And I've read a bunch of James Blish stuff now. And I'm really, really enjoying him as an author. And I have a feeling that if you take the time to read him, you'll enjoy him too. Jerome Bixby is in here. If you remember, I believe Jerome worked quite a bit on the original Star Trek TV series. There's The Cold Equations by Tom Godwin, which was, at the time that it was written, considered one of the most controversial short stories ever written. Alfred Bester's famous Fondly Fahrenheit. Flowers for Algernon is in there. And then finally, A Rose for Ecclesiastes. That is a great story. And I read that one just a few years ago in the anthology that Samuel Delany put together on Roger Zelazny's body of work. Just this page of stories alone is like a who's who of science fiction history. So if you can find the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, I think in larger editions. I have it as a larger edition actually, but it also came out as these very nice old used paperbacks. And I would imagine that even on Amazon, you could probably find this for a couple bucks because the price gouging assholes from the time of the pandemic are starting to back off a little bit on Amazon, and actually paperbacks are starting to turn up at slightly reasonable prices now. Okay, I need a drink, but let's go with volume 2 before I get one. The Greatest Science Fiction Novellas of All Time, edited by Ben Bova, another luminary of science fiction, put together by SFWA. We're looking here. Also, we don't really, I know that someone did this art, but I don't get excited about these kind of covers. But clearly some person worked hard on that cover, so thank you. Oh, wow, I'm seeing this already. Okay, so we got a nice introductory material by Ben Bova. It's probably nice to read. So Call Me Joe is the first story by Paul Anderson. Call Me Joe is the inspiration for Avatar, which was just another in a long line of things that James Cameron has borrowed from. Right? We're going to use the word borrowed to be nice. Borrowed and not given any credit as well. You know that Cameron did the same thing to Harlan Ellison with his Outer Limits episode, The Soldier, and also Demon with a Glass Hand. And by the way, Demon with a Glass Hand on Outer Limits is really freaking good. You really should hunt that one down and watch it. Robert Culp is the star on that, and it's in the old Bradbury building, which is the same building that they use in Blade Runner, with the first Blade Runner movie with Rutger Hauer. And of course Harrison Ford. Such a good Outer Limits episode. The episode The Soldier is also good. I believe that Richard Ansara was the protagonist or the antagonist or whatever in that one. I guess he is the protagonist. He's the hero of that story. Call Me Joe is about a guy who is disabled, working in a space station orbiting around one of the planets in our system. There are life forms down on the planet. His mind connects with them so that he is in them, and in the whole 9 yards. And I mean, does that sound like Avatar? So let's take a look. When was Call Me Joe written? Oh, okay, 1957. This book was widely published and easily available, I'm sure. No coincidence. So there are some other larger stories here. The Marching Morons by C.M. Kornbluth. You really can't go wrong with Kornbluth. Is short-lived writer with a great writing career. Cordwainer Smith, Theodore Sturgeon. Wow, they even put H.G. Wells in there. How cool is that? And Jack Williamson. So that's a nice way to wrap that one up. Another great anthology. Well worth your time and your money to hunt down. So the next edition is the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Volume 2B of the A and B set. This one is also edited by Ben Bova, and this is the greatest science fiction novellas of all time up until that time. This was put together in 1973. So the introduction is by Ben Bova, and then we have The Martian Way by Isaac Asimov. I've never read that story, but I'll bet that would be a good Isaac Asimov story to start with. And then Earthman Come Home by Blish. Blish is such a great writer. Like I told you, Matt at Book Build is a big fan of his and has made me a big fan of his. Here's Rogue Moon by Algis Budrys. I have a really great book by Algis, which was all about how to write science fiction. And I think pound for pound, that little book is the best book I've ever read on how to write a story. It's very succinct, and it's also very honest about what your chances are and what your expectations should be. He does not mince words at all. You're going to work hard if you want to get published. It takes a lot of work and a lot of dedication, and even after a lot of work and dedication, sometimes nothing happens. So there looks like E.M. Forrester's in here with The Machine Stops, Clifford Simak, and Jack Vance. So once again, another edition of this book, just loaded with goodness. It says here, 11 more classic novellas by the most honored authors of science fiction, companion to Volume 2A. All right. Next, we have Science Fiction Hall of Fame, Volume 3. And of the many volumes, I would say that this one is in really good shape, especially for a used book. It's looking good all around. The text block's holding up okay there. There's an interesting kind of bow in this, but it still looks really nice. I mean, this is still a completely readable book. And this one is edited by Arthur C. Clarke and George W. Proctor. So we've got new editorial management. This is quite a jump, 1982. When was, let's just take a look back here really quick. That was 73, right? I mean, I just read it a minute ago, but let's be sure. 73 to 82, nearly a decade. I was not good at math, but I figured that one out. So they waited a while to update us. Introduction is by Arthur Clarke, and then it looks like they're certainly looking back in history a little bit here. Repent Harlequin, the TikTok Man by Harlan Ellison is the first story out of the gate. That's a great start. That is a fantastic short story. Harlan Ellison has an incredible long career's worth of work that he left the world to enjoy. So let me see here. The next one is The Doors of His Face, The Lamps of His Mouth by Zelazny. Just another amazingly acclaimed work by a great author. More work by Aldous and Zelazny from 1965. Coming up to 66, we've got work by McKenna Dickinson and Jack Vance. I'm actually reading The Last Castle right now as a as a double novel, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm actually reading this wonderful Ace double, which is just in fantastic condition. Look at that, no leaning, perfect text block. The other side of it is a Tony Russell Wayman World of the Sleeper, but just look at the great condition that's in. That book was packed away for about 15 years, and it came out of storage looking that good. I got really lucky. Anyway, that digression aside, I am enjoying that short novel, as they call it, I guess. So then you see down here, I and Gomorrah by Samuel R. Delany, considered by many to be one of his great short stories, although I would argue that, okay, I mean, it's for a short story designed the way a short story should be, yes, I and Gomorrah is an amazing work to read in the anthology also called I and Gomorrah. But for my money, The Star Pit is one of the best things that Samuel Delany has done in the realm of short stories. I absolutely love that story, and I've read it several times. You can also listen to it. WBAI out of New York City long ago did a production of it, and the quality holds up, and it's still good to this day. And Delany is actually one of the characters in the story. He does the narration, other stuff, so it's really, really good. You see there's Fritz Leiber's story there. Behold the Man by Michael Moorcock. I mean, this thing just gets better and better. That is a story about a man who travels back in time to see the crucifixion. You know, we'll let the story tell you the rest. Kate Wilhelm, as always, great to have her in. As Anne McCaffrey's famous novella, Dragon Rider. There's Passengers by Silverberg. Oh, and here's another Zelazny, Time Considered as a Helix of Semi-Precious Stones, one of his other greats. And maybe one of Harlan's best stories ever, A Boy and His Dog, is a wonderful short story or novella. I really do recommend it. I also recommend the Don Johnson movie that it got made into. I believe that is now in the Janus collection. And there's also maybe a graphic novel version of that story as well. And I know that Ellison went on to write some more stories in regard to that. Really, this Volume 3, Science Fiction Hall of Fame, is something that, having seen what is in this, I would say that if you're interested in science fiction novellas and short stories, you should seek this book out and get yourself your own copy and guard it jealously and never let anyone have it. It should be yours because it will bring you hours of joy. This is really, I'm surprised at what's in here. I had no idea that it was this good a collection of stories. I've read most of them, but they're all worth reading again. This is a damn good book. Okay, so here we have the final edition that I have. I'm looking over here at the pile as I speak, just to make sure. Yes, this is the last one. I mean, I grabbed them all, every single one that they had. It was such a deal during the sales days that I just figured I'd just swipe them all up. Now, this one was edited by the late Terry Carr. There are many other anthology series done by Terry Carr, and I highly recommend them all. Terry Carr was a science fiction writer of some skill, but really found his way as an editor. I mean, what an excellent editor. So I can imagine that there's some good works in here. So let's have a look. In science fiction, as a culture, the appreciation of a good anthology editor is a very common thing, and everybody has their favorites, but we all know that Gardner Dozois and Damon Knight and Terry Carr and Robert Silverberg, we're all excellent at putting together just top-notch past years, like the past year in review or the past decade in review anthologies. There's always money and time well spent. And this one is from 1986. I think I graduated high school in 1985. It was a long time ago. Oh, there's even an introduction in here by Terry Carr. The introductions tend to be recaps of noted works. I'd have to read it to be sure. So the first story is Ilmet and Lankmar. So that's a Lankmar story of Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser by Fritz Leiber, I'm sure. Slow Sculpture by Theodore Sturgeon. I've never read that, but I have read The Saucer of Loneliness by Theodore Sturgeon, which was also a great story. And also, X-1 did a radio play of The Saucer of Loneliness by Sturgeon. So once again, I do recommend seeking out X-1 old radio plays on YouTube. They're a lot of fun. Might be fun for breakfast. You know, you're getting up in the morning and getting your morning coffee. Just enjoy that instead of the news. You'll have more fun, that's for sure. So I'm looking here. There's Silverberg, Paul Anderson, Arthur Clarke, Joanna Russ from these different years. It's just featuring all this great work from different years. Oh, and of course, here's the ever famous The Death of Dr. Island by Gene Wolfe. That's great. Love is the Plan and the Plan is Death by James Tiptree Jr. She had a very interesting life, and it's well worth looking into if you're curious about authors in any kind of biographical sense. Then you can't go wrong with looking into her life. Born with the Dead by Silverberg. Boy, there's another good one. Ursula Le Guin. Now, I've never read this story the day before the revolution, but Ursula Le Guin's short stories are always entertaining. And that would be it for those. These are all loaded with fantastic stories. So you could find something good to read, or 2 or 3 good things to read in each one of these science fiction halls of fame. And if you're a purist, you just read them from cover to cover because it's entertaining, but it's also an education. So I hope that you've enjoyed these book haul videos, just taking a quick look at these books I picked up at this book haul from the York Emporium in York, PA. I'd like to thank you for stopping by, and have a good day.